very good morning to you. Welcome to the Morning Brief right here on Channels Television. I'm Jeffrey Ozama. Voila, good morning.
Morning, Jeffrey. Well, it's a morning filled with bright sparks. Welcome to your perfect morning starter on Channels Television. It's the Morning Brief, and it's a calm Tuesday morning. We hope it doesn't rain, though it began as a cloudy day slightly on my own side.
Well, mine was very clear. I almost overslept. That's what, early mornings are not quite easy sometimes, but we're here to do what we know how to do, to serve you.
Indeed.
And to provide information as much as possible for you to make sense of the situation, of what's playing out in the polity. And where we will start from is what is happening in Kenya, where the president and other heads of states and heads of government are there for the Africa Forward Summit organized by the French government in collaboration with the Kenyan government, President Ruto and President Emmanuel Macron, all co-hosting this particular event. I think you can see from there some of our ministers. I can see industry, trade and investment, as well as Taiwo Yedele, the Minister of Finance and coordinating Minister of the Economy, waiting on the president's arrival. This was yesterday, actually, so there is an updated part of it where that summit is holding, where collaboration seeking new frontiers. I was listening, Bukola, to I think one of the ministers in Kenya who was talking to the BBC, and he was being asked what exactly is France up to, because the Sahel has actually chased the French nation out of their region because of the many things that we know about. Whether this is more like a French washing, trying to get better or more inroads into the continent of Africa via Nairobi. Curiosity arises because as well, France is, not France, Nairobi is not a francophone country. So people are asking questions. Well, the man said, look, France is a member, has a permanent seat on the Security Council in the United Nations. So that makes them an important partner in the global stage. So whatever it is that can be gotten. But the most important thing is that one of the things, according to that minister, that is being discussed, to make it clear that it's time. Africa should not just be just for extraction only, for exploitation. This should be a place where productivity, production, manufacturing, all of the elements. We don't need aid. Even though aids are coming, we should not plan based on aid. We should come to the table just like China does. China comes with something on the table for all of us. So we're still monitoring to see what will be the eventual outcome. But the good thing is that, at least for the first time in a long while, I'm happy that the French government is coming to Africa to come and host this event in collaboration with Kenya. Because I hate it with a passion when I see 50-something African presidents go to China for Africa-China, go to France for French and Africa. They go to the US, Africa, all of this nomenclature they used to describe. They pack our world leaders and go. And President Ruto, for instance, has been saying, for him, it's almost disrespectful. Why can't we send the chairperson of the AU or one of the few leaders of the African continent to go as a representation? Must they always go that way? So it looks like this was part of, besides France having a very tough time in Africa right now. So people are also saying that this is not really like we need France. France needs us. But, everybody is pontificating as to what the intention is. But underlined is to the fact that Africa is beginning to rise. People are naturally suspicious of the intent of the West when it comes to the relationships we have. But I don't know what you think. What is important to us is what President Bola Tinubu will bring back. I call it Daddy Oyoyo. He went to France. Is now in Nairobi. He should be getting to Kigali from there. So when he does all of this three-nation tour, he needs to come and explain to the people he's leading. When we say Daddy Oyoyo, what did he bring for us? That's what is important to me.
Well, we hope that he does bring some tangible things, back home. But speaking to what you already pointed to during your commentary, the Kenyan president, William Ruto, spoke addressed it as much as he could during the commencement of that summit. I believe when he engaged with the French president, he spoke about how important it was for Africa to also level up in its relations with the West, that this partnership shouldn't be one where Africa takes and takes, but also Africa brings something to the table, and for me that was a very, very interesting position amid this very critical summit that comes, on the heels of, as Jeffrey had said, France's seeming exit from the Sahel region. And that's, the curiosity that seems to be popping up amid this conversation, why Nigeria is appearing to become bosom friends with, a Western nation that, some of the Sahelian countries and former the Francophone countries now, had chased out and severed relations with, and now become more, chummy, if you like, with Russia rather than France. But, France is Nigeria's perhaps second home to Mr. President. Much of his foreign visits and, vacations are spent with France. So it would seem as if France, unlike other African countries, along with some other countries, a bosom, is Nigeria's leading trading partner. And, France also wants to shore up its interests in Africa as well, amid relations having been severed with its traditional, former colonies. And so how will then Nigeria and indeed other African countries participating in this summit level up? Of course, the French president has already promised about 23 billion euros in support to Africa on the heels of this summit that has only just commenced already. And that is huge. That is significant. Kenya is taking up some of it already with 11 partnerships signed, for the development of their transport infrastructure, their rail infrastructure, with even a military cooperation, for which some have criticized Kenya, saying that some of the immunity clauses in that military cooperation may not necessarily augur well for Kenya in the end, when you consider how it has gone sour with, partnerships signed prior to this time with other African countries. But how Nigeria and other African countries now show up, what they bring to the table, will make all of the difference in this Kenya-Africa summit, where they're talking about artificial intelligence, and some of the other topics coming up is international financial restructuring, climate change, amid all of that. So beyond receiving, its share of the 23 billion euro partnership that France is offering, what is Africa bringing to the table? That's what I'm more interested in, Jeffrey, this time around. If it's not seeking investment, then what in terms of human and material resources will it be bringing to the table, such that this is, an equal partnership?
Well said, Bukola, because Africa is not short of summits. We have always seen this summit. So what will happen after 12 months, 36 months, 24 months after this summit? What are we going to say? This was what we got out of this. And again, a new financial architecture is long overdue. Most of the African countries, or a lot of the African countries, let me use that conservatively to say that our credit rating, affects the ability for us to be able to borrow money at a certain interest rate. So the people like United States, even though they are one of the most indebted countries in the world, because I know in the United States it's, I think, maybe 20 or 30-something trillion in debt. I'm not sure the exact figure. But when they are rated, because of their good credit rating, maybe AAA or in the A region, they borrow at maybe 5%, 3%. But ours, when we are rated around the BBB, B minus, B plus, and all of that, or even lesser than that, you see borrowing at premium, 9%, sometimes even more than that, 12%. So all of these conversations have to happen, because one of the things choking Bukola Africa right now is the level of debt. Look at Nigeria's debt burden, 159 trillion in dollar terms, over $100 billion dollars, I should say. If you go to other African countries as well, I'm sure if you do a comparative analytics and just maybe Google it, we'll be able to see where we are. Just imagine that is taking off. And sometimes when these countries are forced by restructuring to devalue their currency, that even makes the local currency get devalued such that raising the money in local currency to be able to match up, if that's how it's raised, apart from oil, it becomes difficult. So, for instance, we're owing maybe $1 billion 5 years ago. If we're to pay back, which they don't really pay back in that sense, if we're to pay back, we'll be talking about maybe 500 billion naira in paying back. But if that money was still being owed as 1 billion, so today we're talking about maybe 1.3 trillion. So you can see, interest, the devaluation will affect it, interest, premium, risks. There are so many things that all of these credit issues that we get. There are so many parameters that have been looked at. You know, the easier ones are maybe our own treasury bills, our ways and means. But as soon as it goes to euro bonds, you get all these multilateral borrowings or bilateral borrowings or project-tied borrowings. Sometimes you see the numbers get quite big. So those are I need the leaders to have a very honest conversation. Very honest conversation. So that it's not a question of just coming, drink tea, shake hands, and go yet again for another summit. And I agree with every leader of Africa who is saying it's time for a new world order that includes Africa on that table. When they met in Bretton Woods, I don't think Africa was represented. 44 nations met in Bretton Woods, and that's why how IMF and the World Banks were created in the 40s. I don't think we were on that seat to negotiate anything. Now it's time for us to look at and say, okay, I think what can we look at? That's why Africa is tilting maybe towards China a lot, because China approaches Africa with a bit of partnership than aid. But the future is ours for the taking.
Indeed, Jeffrey, and that's why I'm interested in what Africa is bringing. If Africa is saying that, you know, no, we shouldn't just be
we have raw materials,
but then, you know, those raw materials are being, you know, mined here. They're taking wholesale some of those raw materials, and then, you know, they're exported for production in other African countries, and that is exportation
in the West,
labor.
not even African countries.
Sorry, in the West, that is exportation of labor and capital. You know, and capital. So, but if they were mined here, if they were turned into finished goods here, that is, you know, a good measure of capital that is retained here.
That is a
and an empowerment, you know, of our young people that is also retained here. So that retention is critical to what we bring to the table. But we're talking about international financial restructuring, and you've rightly said, you know, that devaluation doesn't necessarily work for us. After devaluation, what is still the strength of Nigeria's currency on the African continent is still one of the worst performing currencies. And so, you know, our debt has only gone, you know, up by a higher percentage, you know, against the backdrop of this devaluation. And so what we're owing is even more than what we were owing. Yes, compared to, you know, what the terms were when, you know, partnerships were signed, you know, documents were signed for borrowing. And so those are the conversations that should be had with the leaders of the West. And so Africa should come up showing stronger, you know, with those, you know, investment deals that are signed, such that some of those, you know, gray areas work better for Africa. The negotiations should be stronger, such that they work better for Africa, such that, you know, we can retain a lot of those foreign exchange back home instead of them being exported you know, outside the country.
Yes, at the heart of it is geopolitics. That's in fact, the heart of it is global peace, because interests may mismatch and misalign, and that can cause a lot of trouble. But I think at this point, it's time for us to have that honest conversation and see how it helps all of us, because Africa is due for a transformation. I remember when President Donald Trump visited the Gulf nation, the 3D Gulf. I think he went to Qatar, he went to Saudi Arabia, and one other country in the Gulf nation. And something he said I will never forget. He says it's modern miracle, the Arabian way. We need to look for our own modern miracle, the African way. Neoliberal policies sometimes don't work as we expect it to work. We are very good at adopting ideologies, economic ideologies, not looking at the uniqueness of our own environment. I've always told people there's nothing wrong with subsidy if you can fund it, but there's everything wrong with subsidy if you cannot fund it. So we have to look at ourselves and know how we're going to manage this. I brought in the subsidy issue because now crude price is still above $100, and
President Trump has already said that the Iran deal is shaky. You know, so we're not exiting this period anytime soon.
You know, I told you guys that the closest we can get to getting out of this situation, maybe August. I praised earlier, but the data shows is between 5 to 1 year. So let's just brace up. But what is happening locally in our country? Well, the JAM decision.
Okay, I was hoping we'll get to Plateau State
before
we
ahead,
get
please.
to JAM. That is also very important. According to reports, the Plateau governor is visiting some communities that have suffered attacks in recent times. Yes, this is it. He has visited Nding community in Barikin Ladi local government area, and this comes after recent attacks that claimed several lives and left many families devastated. He was received by officials in Barikin Ladi local government area, and he met with children and survivors of the attack, offering words of comfort and reassurance. I'm sure that Plateau residents are quite familiar with the many visits of the governor in recent times. We recall his visit to Anguan Rukuba in Jos, where attacks claimed quite a number of lives, and he had arrived at that scene at that time in an armored tank, and the youths insisted that he comes down from the vehicle to address them. But beyond the visit to victims of attacks, beyond the words of comfort offered, beyond reassurances that this will be dealt with, what changes significantly? And perhaps this is a good time to ask what happened to the promised CCTV cameras by Mr. President following the flyby visit he made to Jos after the attack in Anguan Rukuba that claimed the lives of many. Have those CCTV cameras even been purchased? Have the contract even been initiated, the documentation done for those cameras to be purchased in the first place? Evidently, no. This is even after the attack on mourners in another area of Plateau that occurred over the weekend. Mourners who were burying their loved ones were attacked yet again, and we saw, videos surfacing online that appeared to, show people running for dear life in an open field. And according to reports coming through from Plateau State, we hear that the police command denied that ever even occurred in the first place. But right after that, we have seen yet another attack, this time in Barikin Ladi, local government area in Jos, where a number of people have also been killed. When are we going to exit this very sad time in Plateau State? It appears as if the state government is not in control of the situation. It appears as if the state government is helpless in the face of things. And, there was so much promise when the governor resumed in 2023, when he, in fact, let us know that there were a number of villages that were in control of bandits in Plateau State in Jos. And so if that is the healthy consensus among residents in Plateau State, that they know where the attackers are, an ethnic group is always named amid this conversation each time there's an attack. The people know who their oppressors are. So if that is the case, why does the state government seem helpless? Jeffrey.
Absolutely. Let's take a listen to the governor. We understand he made some comments to the press.
We have not come to make speeches. I've been on this matter since it started. I've been in touch with the chairman of the local government and the security agencies, trying to contain the situation when it started. And I decided to come in here to see things for myself. Let me first of all bring my condolences to the entire Nding community. Nding is not a new place for me. Those of you who know, I've been to Nding before, and I came here to celebrate the goodness of God. I'm pained that today I have to come to commiserate with you. I have many friends here, brothers from Nding here, and it's a community that I cherish very well. And I've just come this afternoon together with the Honorable Minister just to do two things. One, to commiserate with the families who lost their dear ones, and to reassure you, Nding will not go down. Amen. Nding will not go down.
It took place around 12 a.m., 12 or 5 a.m., when the marauders stormed this village. Our boys were were keeping vigil then. But because it was raining, they decided to take shield in their homes. It was at that time that they took advantage and attacked the village. An attack that left about 11 people dead. Several others, I think about 10, are now receiving treatments in hospitals. Before then, I think about 2 weeks to the date of the attack, the marauders sent a signal by destroying several hectares of land, crops. They destroyed several hectares of land, on a large scale. As if that is not enough. A day before the attack again, they repeated the same thing. They destroyed a vast land of land again. I think several hectares, around Zogu, Bachud, and others. That was Thursday. Then on Friday, they carried out the attack and left about 11 people dead. So I think briefly, this is what happened. 10 are already in the
Bukola, I've heard this governor of Plateau State, Caleb Moftuang, mention it will not fall. I think I've heard him at things once, or this is the second time or so. I've heard him say promises wherever I visit or some of the places he has visited, it will not fall. I think the governor, with the greatest sense of respect, has to rise up to the occasion. Your people are, the value of human lives in Nigeria is quite low, and it's unfortunate. I know that this administration did not start this problem, but they inherited it, but they've not been able to solve it. At a sub-national level, some governors are not helping at all. I think the governors need to rise up. I can imagine him going there. You can see in his body language, he knows that the people are not happy to hear any more of the speeches. They just want action. They don't even want compensation. They just want to be, they don't want to be killed anymore. That's just all people are looking for. They don't want to be killed. They don't need anybody's money. They don't need the president's money. They don't need the governor's money. They don't need anybody's money. They just need to be able to go to their farms, their businesses, their whereabouts, and come back alive. And they'll sort themselves out. These killings on the plateau is becoming totally unacceptable. Even with the president's promises, visit, the president had told the lady whose son was killed, that video went viral, that it will not allow it to happen again. And I told myself, President Bola Tinubu, don't promise what you can't keep, because I know it's not going to happen, because we've not done the right thing. And yet again, not too long after that, people were killed and people are still being killed. We need to, this is the primary responsibility of government. As president, as governor of the state, you need to rise up, protect your people. I think we've said enough, but let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get to the daily. Stay with us. Let's bring in our guest, Mr. Wale Fatade is a journalist, commissioning editor of The Conversation Africa. Mr. Fatade, thank you for coming on the program, and it's been a very long while. Good morning. Oh dear. So, Mr. Fatade, we're trying to establish connection with you. We see you're all kitted and ready for us. So let's try again. Mr. Fatade, can you hear us now?
Yeah, Jeffrey, good morning. I can hear you loud and clear now.
Fantastic. I say it's been a very, very long while. But
oh, Jeffrey, you and I know I come when I'm invited, so I'm here today. You should actually...
This is a good time to be around, because the season is here for a lot of politics. But let's see what the papers are leading with. This Nigeria is the place, and there are a couple of stories I would like you to binge on. Binge through. Let's start with a major headline. 2027 elections impossible without the NYSC, INEC says. Over 1.4 million core members to man polls nationwide. And one of the concerns has been raised, but I think the commission and the government has done something about it. They used to be paid, I think, 20,000. I heard they're about to raise it, or they've raised it already. But what do you make of this assertion by the INEC?
Oh, interestingly, the rain is closer at home now. My own son is one of those NYC members. He's currently on NYC. And the current NYC DG, too, is someone I know personally. And but unfortunately, I'm not sure the INEC chairman really understand the nitty-gritty of NYC. But they are the pool of labor that's always been there for INEC to draw upon. And I think, but the issue of security is very serious. NYC has been more liberal now. There are people posted to some states, and they actually grant the option of redeployment. So I don't know. I mean, and we all know I was watching you now talking about the Plateau State crisis or war by another name. So I don't know how the INEC guys hope to, or INEC hope to walk through that. Because there are some states that the NYC people, I mean the youth corps members, they are not staying. They are redeploying. A batch is leaving camp today, I think. So many of them are putting for redeployment. And the NYC guys are liberal about that now because of the specificity of those states. So I don't know. It's the pool of labor that is always available for NYC, I mean for INEC to call upon. And they pay them for that. But then the issue of security is paramount. I know parents like me who have told their children not to participate in the elections activities.
That's quite personal, and I can understand where that is coming from. It's not easy to put your child in harm's way.
In harm's way until you are in the line of fire.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Nobody will debate that. That's why we're saying government must show responsibility or a sense of responsibility
security, yeah.
About security. But before I let you go and Bukola comes in on this particular paper, maybe we'll touch more on this, is the story besides the picture we see there that this is a political story. I'm not in APC. I don't know what's happening to Fubara, says Wike. So, you know, the governor of River State, Siminalayi Fubara, at the days when the other governors were screened, he wasn't there. I think himself, Kwara governor, I think Ebonyi governor, that we got to know the number of governors that were not present through the chairman of the APC. But we later saw the governor show up, finish his screening. At least he entered the screening room. We're not sure whether he was screened or not, but he came out. He didn't comment anything with the press, and the press started, you know, there are so many things being said. So I don't know who asked Nyesom Wike, the FCT minister, about it. He said, well, I'm not in their party. So what do you make of this issue? Because also 98 people, or 94 to 98 persons, were screened for the Assembly, House of Assembly election primaries, rather, for the APC. About 33 were cleared. More numbers were not cleared, and amongst those not cleared were prominent members, prominent supporters or loyalists of Siminalayi Fubara. I think the Wike supporters, they all got cleared, the ones that are in the APC. So it looks like this crisis is far from over. What do you make of it?
Excuse me. Thanks, Jeffrey. I think even a fetus, someone in the womb will know that Mr. Wike's statement is a lie. Yes. And but I think Governor Fubara should walk home nicely. That's all. He's being a beneficiary of this kind of paddy arrangement, if you pardon that colloquialism. And so if he's not favoring you this time around, you got nobody to blame. You did not emerge through a clean process yourself. Governor Wike, as it was then, nearly just prop him up. So if he's not favoring you now, just move on. But Mr. Wike should stop pulling wool over our eyes. We know is the Yoruba saying that the witch cried yesterday and the child is dead today. We know he's more APC than PDP.
Well, I guess Nigerians won't have a difficulty finding out who the witch and who the child is.
Oh, definitely.
Let's head to the Vanguard newspaper now this morning, and politics is still very much the talking point here. If you check the big story on the Vanguard newspaper, 2027 presidency, Jonathan caught in PDP's quagmire. Of course, the minister's name pops up yet again here. Wike Turaki's camps flex muscles. Ex-president has 24 hours to obtain nomination form. Jonathan didn't buy our form. We're not expecting him. That's ascribed to Wike-backed PDP. And news came through that the court has set aside May the 15th to rule on the suit challenging the former president's eligibility to contest the 2027 election. Some have put a bet to it that former President Jonathan will not run eventually, that, this is just a back and forth around his interests that we have now become familiar with for every electioneering cycle. But I think it's different this time, especially when you see that there has been a response by Mr. Jonathan's lawyers to that suit challenging his eligibility. Does it indicate a definite interest in the top job?
Thanks, Bukola. You and I know I'm not our colleague Ikechi Kweze, who speaks for President Jonathan. But President Jonathan is somebody at a certain level that I admire. And I think I'm in that former group you mentioned. I don't think he's going to run. I don't think so. Because where is the structure? And those of us who report, who analyze and pontificate outside the political arena, outside the players, sometimes we don't really understand the way they move. I think this kind of his movement now, or this kind of his moves, they are actually just meant to send a kind of a confusing signal. I can wager it. And that's the feelers I got from his camp. Rather. I don't think President Jonathan is going to run. I don't think so. Because the NDC, which is actually been, I don't want to use own, which is actually under the thumb of his kinsman, Senator Seriake Dixon, I'm not sure that platform is open for him. And we've seen the battle of the Makinde PDP or Turaki PDP versus the Wike PDP. So where is the path? And then remember the Electoral Act, which register, as the President Jonathan actually registered, is it May 30 or May 10 they were supposed to submit a register? Has that not closed? I don't think so. I don't think President Jonathan will run. It's his right to run, but I'm sure those who are persuading him to run are setting him up for something much more sinister, which he should be wise and smart enough not to fall into.
Interesting. So let's stay with the New Telegraph this time. Let's stay with the New Telegraph newspaper. It says FG admissions outside JAM illegal. Minimum entry age still 16 years. Pegs 150 minimum score for varsities, colleges of nursing, and 100 for polytechnics. Exempts NCE candidates ND in non-tech agri courses from UTME. The relevant courses disquiet as policy stirs controversy. Mr. Fatade, you can intervene on that.
Jeffrey, what wants me to say? What do you want me to say? And I think this is a recurring pattern. It shows how things are tough for us as a country. Because if we don't get our education system right, the quality of our products, the people that channels, my own organization, private employers, or the government service, or public service will hire, it shows how the quality is going down. But I think the 150, was it not 150 last year too? It shows the cutoff point is not set arbitrarily. Yeah, it's set based on, and kudos to those wonderful boys and girls that we have seen in the top 10 or 11 list. 368 or 369, I think is the highest this year. Or 372, God bless them. But when you look at the nitty-gritty, and I think based on the feelers I'm getting, performance this year is actually poorer in terms of the overall. And statistics can say so many things, but when you see 360 something, 360 this, ask questions. How many other people score like that? So, and in as much as I'm not a friend of JAM, you know that much now. But I think this is based on the kind of scores that those students got. So that's what we are going to do. And the issue of NCE and ND, it's how do I put it? It's a double-edged sword. Are you saying, remember again, our educational policy sets NCE as the minimum certificate for any teacher before you are registered by the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria. So are we saying those ones do not need anything? Do not need to sit for UTME or whatever? Or are we saying that education is seen, and I speak now as a son of retired teachers. My parents spent their entire lives teaching. Are we saying that teaching is now that drag of society, or the teachers are the drag of society rather, that they don't need to be certificated or they don't need to be knowledgeable? This kind of multiple messages or confusing messages, we need to be careful about that. Otherwise, we are setting ourselves up for failure.
Well said. Mr. Fatade, there are more papers for you to bring your thoughts on. The Nigerian Tribune. I don't know whether Bukola took, but I don't think it's. I think it was Vanguard she took. Let's talk about Nigerian Tribune. Rivers, fate of Fubara's men hangs in the balance. I think I commented this on this before now. List of 33 cleared aspirants, 65 disqualified, others in circulation. Screening committee secretary disowns list. We actually saw a report, but we don't know what to believe anymore. Report not before National Secretariat asked aspirants have right of appeal. So that's according to the APC National Secretary, credited to him, I think Mr. Senator Bashiru. So Wike and his group have what they call the Rainbow Coalition, more like collapsing two political parties into one. So they say it's controlling both parties. And now his men in the APC cleared by that list. Fubara's men in the APC not cleared by that list. So that, but there's the National Secretary is saying we don't even have the list yet. But if you were not cleared, you can appeal. What do you make of this?
My brother, Senator Ajibola, knows what he's saying, but we are not deceived by that. The drama playing out in Rivers as the imprimatur of the APC headquarters, or even the president himself. So you should move on to the next thing.
I like the fact that you're already tired of. You're tired of knowing.
Of course, I mean,
there's no point. There's no point missing words.
There's no point in this going about that. He's a lawyer. He's got a PhD in law for that matter. So, but he and I know that things are not like that. That's what he just said to our colleagues so that they have something to report. But the real drama is not that. That's it.
All right, just above the nameplate, we still have a story there. Jet A1, that Jet A1 fell with the Iran war and the surge in price, and government, you know, we're running a neoliberal policy. Airfare surge looms amid airline route network cuts. The airlines are struggling, literally.
Like all of us, Jeffrey, every Nigerian is struggling.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, every Nigerian is struggling. The National Bureau of Statistics, by its figures released last week, the transportation costs rose this year in many places by 300%. So that affects all of us, not just. And then air travel at certain level is a privilege. It's meant for the privileged few. And so, I mean, privileged few. So I don't really know what the airline operators are saying. As the ticket price not surged before, how much was a Lagos Abuja one-way ticket before January this year? So, which other surge again? Let it surge. Those who have to fly will fly, but those who cannot afford it will definitely not afford it. So the airline industry is not different from the other sectors of the economy. I agree, however, and we have seen this happening. We just saw Spirit Airlines in the US being helped by the government to ease its way into bankruptcy. The airline industry deserves support from the government. I support that. Whichever way they can do it for them, based on the peculiarities that we have now. But airlines operators should stop threatening us. Every other thing is surging. So we know that, and their own ticket prices or ticket fares do have surged before. So, what else?
Yeah, Mr. Fatade, I remember I'd flown for less than maybe 20,000. There was even a day I flew for almost 10,000.
Jeffrey, when I started journalism in the 90s, we were flying for 5,000, 6,000.
Yeah, I've flown for about that, not that low, but somewhere in the region of 10,000. But Mr. Fatade, we're totally out of time. We're totally out of time. Wale Fatade, journalist, commissioning editor of The Conversation Africa. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
A pleasure.
We'll be back in just a moment. Stay with us.
Welcome back, and so we begin right away our very first conversation this morning, and we're looking at the gains and of course the goals, the possible gains, the projections and the goals of the Kenya-Africa Summit currently ongoing in Kenya. And we have a mix of our resource persons joining us this morning for this conversation. First of all, let's welcome Mr. Onyekachi Adekoya, a security expert and managing director, Aquiline Intelligence and Defense Consulting, who joins us virtually from South Africa. Good morning, Mr. Adekoya.
Good morning. Good morning to the viewers. Thank you for having me.
And of course, we are hoping to join us later on, Mr. Stephen Landy, President, Manchester Trade Limited Incorporated. He's joined us already, and of course is also the former Chief Trade Policy Negotiator with the U.S. government and a U.S. African Affairs analyst. Mr. Landy, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Welcome. And so we'll begin with you, Mr. Adekoya. First of all, it's curious and it's part of the conversation that a Kenya-Africa summit is holding, in an Anglophone country, a summit co-hosted, I believe, by France as well, with France having very strong interest in this summit, of course, with commitments made. But it's curious that it's holding in an Anglophone country rather than a Francophone country. What are your thoughts on the, the interests and, of course, the renewed partnership with France and Anglophone countries?
Okay, I see the line of the thought, but remember that America would host its own conferences sometimes in Kenya. Kenya has I think, a strategic alliance with America also. If France is doing the same thing as a great power, it's needless to say that the great powers have interest in what happens in Africa. If you call it an African Security Conference and you set it up in any African country, I think it's within that remit. I don't want to go into the speculation of what is, what is not. I mean, we'll just be flogging a dead horse by saying that, of course, France has lost out in Francophone countries. If you look at the current destabilization in Mali, the blockade of Bamako, sentiments within the alliance states are not suggesting that they will be coming back to France anytime soon. That said, Africa is very important when you talk about the world and global economy, such that you see the conflict between China, Russia, or amongst China, Russia, even Great Britain and France, still wanting to have some level of leverage and stake. Before we even begin to talk about the different military bases of even Turkey in Africa. So it's all about national interest, and France is within its own remit to pursue its own interests. It's just for Africans to see if they are willing to buy what France is willing to sell. My own assessment.
And that's a very interesting angle to it. What is France selling and what is Africa buying? What is Africa also selling? Maybe I should take this to Mr. Landy. We've heard the French president say that, there are no hang-ups to this relationship. As much as we're investing and there's a potential 250,000 jobs from this 23 billion euro commitment, we're also hoping to have African leading businessmen invest in France. So what is France in pursuit of? Or perhaps more importantly, what has France lost as a result of the severing of ties, with its, traditional former colonies, the Francophone countries, that it is now seeking in Anglophone countries?
What we are watching is the failure of French policy and an attempt to reposition or repivot themselves. Starting from the blunder a few years ago of not attending the funeral. The French did not have the president attend the funeral of Leopold Senghor, who was the president of Senegal, was a great Francophone person, very pro-French and so on, and not attend his funeral sent a very negative signal. His position in what is now the Central African Republic with Mr. Bokassa all disappeared on them. They then had got into trouble. I don't want to beat a dead horse, to quote what my friend from South Africa said, but it's clear that they are losing influence in their former colonies. Now that it appears that the Russians may also have possibly overstayed their welcome, have not done as well as one would think, it looks to me like things are going to head towards the United States, which will not make the French very happy. So my reading is that almost as a last move, he's saying, okay, well, let me reach out to the Anglophone countries. Let me reach out to, of course, Kenya, which in many ways is a bleeding country. But Kenya is very, very much involved with the world. It has close relations with China. It has close relationships with the United States and so on. It certainly is not going to be a substitute for the dominant French position that they were holding in French Africa. So my feeling is that this is a desperate move by the French as they see their influence decline at the same time as American, Chinese influence are increasing or have increased in Africa, and certainly in Francophone Africa.
All right, Mr. Adekoya, let's take it to Mr. Adekoya. This is more of a political and trade alliance or partnership as it's seen. And there's so many things running through my head, but let me put it this way. Does this sound to you or look to you that what is playing out in geopolitics? Geopolitics here, I'm mentioning names: United States, Europe, not necessarily France, but in this case, France, China, and somewhere Russia in the mix. Is this a question of Berlin Conference 2.0, but we have now a seat on the table?
Geoffrey, I think running a very long analysis, the March date. I mean, you won't put the Berlin Conference with the African Conference in the same light, because you look at the format of the Berlin Conference. I mean, to some extent that there are similarities trying to address issues between great powers and where the fault lines lie, and then looking for collaboration going forward. So in the African context, of course, Africa is significantly fragmented, having different alliances across different actors in the national space. So there's no cohesion, even in the African Union, as it were. Now, like my colleague did say, and he did posit that perhaps America would be the greater beneficiary of the new reshaping of what power looks like in Africa. I think I beg to disagree a bit, because America's relationship with Africa has not been one that is mutually beneficial, as it were. It's been a bit one-sided, with the U.S. spending more, sometimes not being very clear on what the policy should be when it comes to matters on the African continent, except, of course, when it affects their own interests. So there's been no clear U.S. strategy on defense cooperation, as I see it, across the African continent, which is why you see that most African countries shop from everybody. They buy from the Americans, from the Russians, from Pakistan, from everywhere. But to his point, I think Donald Trump understands where the new world order is coming to. So he's also shaping for that future. I wouldn't say it's a Berlin Conference per se, because type format, because even among the African players, it's not with one voice. Africa is not with one voice, and there's no clear path forward. France is a fringe player, as it were, trying to rediscover itself now on the African continent. So it doesn't carry the same weight, I would say. Then on geopolitics, of course, we are now in what we call an anarchical world order, where I think I gave a paper last 4 years thereabout, and I said that we're coming to a phase in global politics where strategic alliances will replace multilateral organizations. And which is why you see France is now trying to silo its approach, to cover its own bases and interests on the African continent, not minding the interests of the European Union or that of the Americans or the Chinese or Russia. So we are now in that stage where, seemingly might is right. National interest first. There's the great rise of populism, nationalism. Politics is also becoming a bit challenged. You see what's happening in UK. So it's just a sign of the times. There's nothing hectic, nothing in the same bench with the Berlin Conference, if you ask me.
Yes, I know that Africa has always been the beautiful bride in this sense, but whether that bride price is being paid is a different matter altogether. We can look at it differently. But let me bring Mr. Lander in. Someone had written and said this relationship, as Mr. Adeka has mentioned, France approaching it in silos, because they are trying to cover their own bases, given what they have suffered in terms of setback, like you've eloquently explained at the very beginning of your statement. Somebody said it's a recalibration driven by necessity, not generosity. This is more like saying France or the West needs us in a sense, especially when it comes to the things that God has blessed Africa with that is beneath our earth. So if you were to advise Africa on these kinds of conversation, what should Africa put on the table as non-negotiable, else whatever bilateral or relationship we're talking about, we may need to have another conversation altogether?
Well, this is a fascinating conversation, and we are certainly covering a lot of aspects. So to try to bring it together, let me respond this way. In my view, there are two countries that currently are the superpowers of the world, the United States and China. There'll be a summit next week, one of four expected meetings between Chairman Xi and President Trump, which in many ways will probably be very determinative of the future and will play a role in whatever other particular disputes you're looking at. Vis-a-vis Africa at the moment, the most influential countries on an economic basis is China, and certainly on a diplomatic or political basis is the United States. The relationship with South Africa, which as we know is not the best, at least puts the U.S. in the center as far as the focus goes. The fact that President Trump backed Felix Tshisekedi in the Congo, while the French and other European countries were playing around with the other side, and the current way the situation is moving now shows that, again, the U.S., China has the influence. Nigeria, from what I can see and from where I've been sitting, from the most recent discussions about the civil unrest, the relationship of Christians, Muslims, whether you agree or not with the actions that were taken, once again, it was the United States that definitely was the only country that seemed to be playing a role in that particular discussion. So I think you talk on one, say, China and the U.S., which may I point out were not part of the Berlin conference. Maybe we'll have a new conference and we'll give it a new name, but it's an interesting comparison that was raised. Now, this really, however, enhances Africa's position, because there's no question that Africa has the possibility of being a powerhouse throughout the rest of this century. When you look at its minerals, when you look at its population, when you look at its youth and so on, there's no question that it is there. So my own picture that I picture in the future in trying to answer your question is that China and the United States, I think, will be in the center. Africa will be a very important player. My reading is that Africa will not choose sides, but will carefully calibrate their positions between the two countries. They will try to get the most they can out of the relationships with both countries. I assume they will have a more independent policy, perhaps they've had in the past. But I think the upcoming world will be exciting for China, the U.S., and for Africa. I do not know the role that Europe will play until it can get its own house in order. And that would be my response to this picture and the role I think Africa will play.
Let's reflect on lessons now, especially as France has begun to woo Anglophone countries. And earlier on, Mr. Lande, you referred to the failure of French policy in Francophone Africa. I'm coming to you with this one now, Mr. Adekoya. We've seen France withdraw troops from Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, following coups that were recorded in the Sahelian part of Africa in those countries. And we've seen that, you know, countries like Senegal and Ivory Coast are also beginning to rethink their relations with France. Despite the fact that, you know, France pushes back on the question mark on the lack of excellence in its military bilateral relationship with Sahelian Africa, why do you think that, you know, this part of Africa continues to fight terrorism, despite the fact that, you know, over the years, France had stationed in those countries on the Sahel its troops? So why do you think there's been a huge failure on, you know, by this part of Africa to tackle terrorism, despite the involvement of the French over the years?
Well, I think the French, as you know, have been very successful in terms of their military presence. They have been very successful in terms of their military presence. They have been very successful in terms of their military presence. They have been very successful in terms of their military presence.
Okay, thank you. You're asking a very difficult question. And you forgive me if I cannot give you my very sincere answer on national TV. But let me attempt let me attempt a very general speak. I talked about the fragmentation of African politics. And, you know, if you look at the African continent, you probably think that we are one people, but we're not. Nigeria, for example, has over 250 ethnic groups. That's a lot. And then we're fragmented along different fault lines. If you just take Nigeria as an example, the North and South divide, even within the North, there's a new Hausa resurgence saying that the Hausas want to reclaim their heritage and, you know, stand alone. So what foreign invaders and foreign powers have done is to, you know, to divide, keep the people fragmented, keep them occupied with little skirmishes, and then, you know, get in and exploit. So that has been the case pre-independence for most African countries, and that has created some. I mean, if you look at Rwanda, for example, what caused the genocide, one of the factors, as it is reported, because I visited Rwanda also, I visited the church. One of the churches, you know, made certain comments, you know, and then the colonial powers had tried to put one tribe over other tribes, despite the fact that the tribe was in minority. So if you look at the Central African belt coming down to West Africa, you know, the cases are there. The Boko Haram insurgency, you see what's happening in Mali, you know, there's a lot of infighting, and those infighting are being exploited, as it were, for other interests, other geopolitical leverage. So we can put it at that, because you ask the question, where's the weapons coming from? Where's the training coming from? Where's the sophistication coming from? And different great powers have had different clandestine operations across the world, you know, to further their own interests. And some would argue that, you know, some of these actions are not far-fetched. You know, so you just need to look at who's benefiting the most. Who's benefiting the most from the ouster of Great Britain, from most of its colonies? Who benefited the most from that phase? Who's going to benefit from the phase of France losing in Francophone Africa, and who will benefit the most? So maybe you want to look at who benefits the most from the outcomes of this conflict, and then you may begin to try and understand why these things seem to be there for a long time. Just questions. There are more questions than answers. I guess my colleague would have answers.
Yeah.
I guess Mr. Stephen would have answers.
And I'm taking it to him. Interesting perspective. And I won't forget your first line of thought. You said you would not be able to provide a very sincere answer on national television. But Mr. Lande, is it that simplistic for you? Are there divisive elements to this conflict? Should we absolve the French of a responsibility in the failure of its military bilateral relationship with Sahelian Africa?
No. I think what people don't realize is that for 1,000 years there has been a struggle between Christianity and Islam. And this has gone, as you know, in different directions. First, very successful for Islam, then a defense in some of the Eastern European cities where the westward movement was slowed up. Then we went back and forth again. And so far, the United States, maybe in Afghanistan, France, Russia, has yet not been able to figure out how one can get control of this, quote, terrorism. I don't know if I would call it terrorism. The other side is always a terrorist, depending on what's going on and so on, particularly. But having said that and so on, I think you have to have an understanding of the religious movement. But these are not world powers yet. They are very strong in communities. They are very strong locally. So I think my response is that for the moment, I don't think anybody has really gained from this. I don't know the answer to what to do with the insurrections that are taking place in so many countries, including in Nigeria and so on, and how you deal with it. And we do not, no one seems to come up with a solution for it, and so on. But my own particular feeling is that the French are not going to come back in French Africa. I think the U.S. will be back there first. And I do not think that, given the fact they're up against Chinese American influence, as well as the increasing influence of the South in general. Look at who's making peace in these parts of the world, who are the mediators now, more and more. They are from southern countries and so on, etc. So my own feeling is that France will not be able to come back, and certainly will play a role in dealing with Anglophone Africa, but certainly not the leading role. I do not think the French will play a leading role in Nigeria in any way, shape, or form compared to China, the United States, and of course, whatever role the United Kingdom still plays.
Mr. Lande, thank you. Well, at the end of the conversation is to find out how well have we fared with all of these relations. Where is Africa today in terms of size, in terms of GDP, in terms of continental security? Because effort is good. Result is the best way to test whether those efforts are good or not. Must thank you, Stephen Langde. He's the president, Manchester Trade Limited Incorporated, former chief trade policy negotiator with the USG, U.S. Africa Affairs Analyst. Thank you so much, Mr. Lande. We can allow you go back to sleep this morning. Thank you. Also, Mr. Onyekachi Adekoya is a security consultant and expert. He's the CEO of Aquiline Intelligence and Defense Consulting. Thank you, Mr. Adekoya. Thank you, sir.
Let me just make one quick comment.
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
One of the most interesting conversations I've had, and I don't think in any way it could be a stimulative. I couldn't do anything as stimulative at 3 a.m. in the morning in Washington than meet with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Okay, we'll now shift gears. Now, this next conversation is of interest to all of us because as I sit here, I've literally been struggling. I'm connected to 2 networks. I don't want to call them out yet. And I've literally been struggling, switching on those networks to be able to even do my work. Because when we're seated here, sometimes we need to do research on the go. It's been quite difficult. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. That's why the next man has a lot of questions to answer from me and from you. He's the President, Association of Telecommunications Companies of Nigeria, Mr. Tony Emokpere. Mr. Emokpere, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
I don't think Nigerians are smiling with you. I know you're smiling, but we'll start with a smile this morning. One of the biggest conversations right now as far as the polity is concerned is not just about politics. It's about the quality of service that the telcos are offering to Nigeria. It's not very good. I don't want to use a very horrible word, so let me manage my words properly. It's not good. Sometimes it's quite terrible. Maybe let's give you the benefit of the doubt of somebody who is within that space to explain to Nigerians exactly, sir, what is going on? Because remember when the organization had come out to say, look, what we are charging is not commensurate with what we're expected to charge because it's not market reflective. And there was an advocacy. We hosted some of your persons here and made that advocacy as well. An increase was allowed, at least to a reasonable extent, or so some fair extent. But with the hike in data costs and in all of these costs, we're seeing poorer quality. What's going on, sir?
Well, thank you again. Like you said, every Nigerian, every consumer has a right to proper service and fair service. So that is not to deny anybody that right. And you are paying for that service, and that service is supposed to be delivered to you appropriately. The challenge has been that infrastructure really has not kept pace with demand. That was why the clamor was for this tariff that you mentioned. And not only this tariff, there are also several other advocacies that have been mentioned, which, in fairness to the government, most have been attained. But right now, the challenge is that infrastructure, one, is trying to keep pace with the demand, and the infrastructure doesn't get delivered overnight, and there's massive effort being made to improve and deliver more infrastructure to cope with all this demand.
So when you say infrastructure-wise, I remember very well that one of the concerns that were raised could have been addressed through fiscal measure by the government. I remember, I've forgotten his name, the gentleman that came here. He talked about the multiplicities of, let me call them taxes and levies that were being paid, including for, is it effervescence now? I'm sorry if I didn't get that word correctly, like the smoke that comes out from the generator, all of the levies being paid. He calculated it to be between 30-something and 40-something. And he said this has a knock-on effect in terms of the cost for doing business for the telcos. So let's address it one after the other. What has government done besides allowing a hike in your tariff? What have they done beyond that to be able to help you provide better service or deliver better infrastructure so that you can provide better service for the people? And then what are you not doing or you are about to do in specifics?
Okay, well, in terms of, you mentioned one of them already, the increase in tariff is one thing that the government has done. Most of the other things that have been done by the government are things like, for example, declaring communication infrastructure as a critical national asset. So right now, it's actually an offense to damage any communication infrastructure. We still see huge infrastructure damage, okay, in terms of road constructions, in terms of people deliberately cutting cables, deliberately vandalizing our equipment, which is one of the things that adversely affects the service. But you mentioned things like multiple taxation, which is one of the things we've advocated for. Government has been negotiating because, you know, most of these things are actually not at the federal level, but at the state level. And I'm in continuous engagement with different states. For example, some states have actually waived off right-of-way. I think up to 11 states, for example, have waived off right-of-way charges completely. So these are positive things that are being done. We see government also talking about investing, for example, the Project Bridge, where the government wants to invest in deploying 90,000 kilometers for fiber around the whole country, which will ably help in this infrastructure. So the challenge is that it's the keeping of pace. The changes, if you remember, this tariff increase hadn't been increased for about almost 12 years till the time the government increased it, which is this administration, which we very much commend. But keeping pace with the demand is the challenge.
So what can you tell us about your engagements with the federal government on subjects like infrastructure development and the poor network challenge that you have identified, or rather the destruction to telecoms infrastructure that you have identified? What can you tell us about your engagements with the federal government that will lead to significant outcomes to addressing these challenges? And what timelines really can you give Nigerians that between now and a projected time, these issues can be solved, and then we can exit this era of dropped calls, poor performing data, undelivered SMS, and the general complaints that are shaping telecom services?
Well, rightly, the minister actually made the pronouncement of this issue, I think yesterday or the day before. We continuously engage with the regulator. NCC has been having several meetings across all stakeholders within our sector, both the operators and also the infrastructure providers and also the service providers. So all hands are on deck. There's a myriad of engagements. I don't know if you can still see me. A myriad of engagements going on regarding this. The
engagements are still on. So you can't make any commitments to the outcomes of those engagements.
No, what I can say is that they have been positive. Like I said, things are already being done. Projects are already being put in place. Commitments have already been made to the regulator by the MNOs. Most in generally, I don't think these issues will surpass this year.
Okay, now let's talk about what can be achievable within this time while we wait for the outcomes of those conversations. The networks, the telecom services are, performing really, really poorly, and that's putting it mildly. First, Nigerians are complaining about data validity. If I checked my balance now, my data balance, I could have, you know, perhaps an average balance. But if you checked what is, you know, an accumulation of data validity that has become expired, that's a huge quantum. Can the telecoms providers come to an agreement, you know, to lift this particular aspect of the policy such that, you know, validity does not expire until you have exhausted what you purchased as data, because that is also regarded as extortion by Nigerians in service provision?
Well, I'm not sure if your premise is totally accurate. I know that data is valid. I think there's regulation to that effect from NCC. What happens is that once you renew your subscription, your existing data gets added up to your new data. So I'm not sure that is totally accurate in terms of data is not expired. But what happens is that once you renew your subscription, your data gets added on to your new subscription.
It doesn't get added on, sir. And I'm sure Nigerians who are watching can confirm, especially if you pick a different plan. What was purchased before expires and you cannot access it again. There's a huge quantum of expired data currently on not just my own subscription, but on the subscription of many Nigerians.
Well, the good thing is that there's a consumer arm of the regulator where all these things are being handled. NCC has a consumer arm where reports are made by consumers, and if there are issues like this, they're being tackled already by the operators.
So let's talk about what will be fair for the consequence of poor service delivery. You know, when we don't buy data and we don't buy credit, we can't make calls, we can't browse, we can't do the things we use these things for. But when you don't deliver your service, no matter how horrible the service is, there's really nothing we can do about it. What will be the fair consequence for failing to do your part, apart from sanctions by the federal government, monies that don't come to us necessarily? It's the government that manages that money, but for the consumer?
I would just like to assure everyone, it's in no operator's best interest to provide poor service. No operator wakes up in the morning to provide a service and is resting and saying that, oh, my service is poor, and they sit down and relax. It's not in anybody's interest. Definitely not the operator, definitely not the system, even the ecosystem, definitely not the industry. So everybody is challenged by these problems, and all hands are on deck to solve these challenges. And things are already being done, like I said. Now, in terms of what would be a fair compensation, so to speak, I think there's a myriad of regulations that the NCC has put in place for things of this nature, and they're already being applied. And like you mentioned, sanctions are already put in place as well. And no operator wakes up in the morning. I mean, we even had a recent engagement where the recent sanctions that were applied are being seen as a big challenge, because there are still so many problems we face as an industry in terms of infrastructure damage, in terms of vandalization, and things that really actually impact our ability to deliver quality service to the industry. And some of these things are beyond what the operators can even manage themselves. And I would like to use this opportunity here to advocate and clamor for everybody to look at communication infrastructure as critical. We are all here complaining about poor service, but when we see people vandalizing infrastructure, we don't complain. When we see people cutting cables, we don't report. So we'd like to use this opportunity to please talk to everyone to see how we can collectively protect communication infrastructure, which is, we can all see the effects of when they are damaged, and we are all feeling the heat right now.
Let's talk about how this impacts broadly beyond, consumption by individual consumers. Election management, national security. So let me take them in bits. We've had a back and forth with the National Assembly over provision of a section. I don't want to drag you into politics, but I'll bring you into what concerns you. Section 60, subsection 3 had to do with electronic transmission of results. And there was a debate over whether the proviso of alternative, whether there should even be a proviso, because according to when Professor Mahmoud was chairman of INEC, I think it was a 2021 report after they'd done some research about 2 years down the line between INEC, NCC, I think mobile network operators, I've forgotten the acronym now, but your group assuring that came out with a paper, a position paper to say 93 or so % of the 176,000 polling units have some level of network connectivity, at least from 2G and above. And then the other 7,000 or so, or 7%, can be sorted by your other forms of technology. But the Senate, for instance, doubled down on their position about network and all of that, also released their paper without citing that position paper. So my question is perhaps to you, what assurances are we getting as we get towards, to approach the 2027 election, that we're not going to have network issues that can affect the credibility of the process, because the trust quotient is very low. Glitch caused big trouble in the last election, and we don't want that to happen anymore.
Well, I can't speak to election issues or election matters. I can only speak on the industry side. Nigeria is pretty well covered, as you mentioned in the report that you cited. And so in terms of coverage, that is not a challenge. The issue is that we need to ensure that our infrastructure are protected. If, for example, somebody tries to sabotage an area when election is going on, we need critical protection for all communication infrastructure. And then this kind of challenges will not happen. So the issue is not necessarily the coverage, but the issue is how do we safeguard infrastructure. I know that there are several groups, even right now, even up to the ONSA, ensuring that these things, other issues that are critical, are being handled. I know prosecutions are being had for people that vandalize infrastructure. I know a lot of security agencies are being put in place to safeguard this infrastructure. So the issue is not coverage. The issue is acts of sabotage, acts of vandalism, and all eyes needs to be on deck to ensure that we actually protect this infrastructure.
Let's look at what should be the justification or lack of the poor services that Nigerians are, experiencing from telecoms subscribers. I'm looking at the annual profit returns of some of the leading networks in Nigeria, and I'm seeing that profits have surged in the last year. For some, they have doubled what they recorded in 2024 and 2025. Some have recorded more than double the profits that they're returning. One of the network subscribers has actually recorded a 1.1 trillion naira profit returned in the 2025 performing year. And yet you talk to us about, challenges in infrastructure, taxes. And last year we actually saw the network providers pushing for an increase, which they were able to secure. So what's the justification for the less than desired services that Nigerians are experiencing if Nigeria is the leading market for telecom services and has a huge number of subscriber base, and yet Nigerians are recording poor services?
I think one of the things when I hear comments like this, one of the things I know that people tend to forget is the huge amount of investment that's required to deliver services in Nigeria. Nigeria is a big country. It's a huge landmass. To cover this whole country, you don't know you cannot imagine the amount of investment. Even, for example, let's take, for example, fiber cable laying. As we have, despite all the years of communication infrastructure, we only have about over 30,000 kilometers laid in the country. Now you can see, even with the Project Bridge, which aims to deploy about 90,000 kilometers, we still know that that is not totally sufficient. So the dynamics of Nigeria is pretty different from other countries. One of the challenges, when I've had the opportunity to speak about this, is the fact that other countries, when they liberalized their sector, they had their existing national operator provide the backbones for all operators to ride on. So when you go to other countries, take for example South Africa, Telkom, which was the national operator in South Africa, is still in existence till today. And they provided the backbone for operators to leapfrog into these new services we're talking about. In Nigeria, that was not the case. Every operator that came into Nigeria had to build infrastructure from scratch. And these are not things that other countries, especially in Africa, had to face. It's only in Nigeria that an operator had to build his own backbone, transmission backbone, had to build all sorts of infrastructure, which in other countries they were existing. And we are still playing catch up till today, which is why we applaud the federal government's initiative of this Project Bridge, because which will serve to help with these gaps that have not been there. So the issue is not that people are making huge profits. The issue is that there's a huge amount of capex that is being popped in to deploy these services. And then coupled with that, as you are deploying, as you are building, you are being vandalized. That equipment that should last 20 years doesn't last more than a year. You know, batteries that are supposed to be there for 15 years are being stolen. So it's a myriad of challenges. So when you look, we only see one side of the equation. We don't see the huge huge costs that are involved.
Mr. Mokwere, you say the telecoms subscriber providers are still playing catch-up. 1.1 trillion naira doesn't look like catch-up from where I sit, and it certainly looks like catch-up from where you sit. $813 million in one financial year. That doesn't look like catch-up. That looks like a lot of profit, a return on investment.
Did you look at the investment side? When you look at the investment side, it's not. When I said catch up, it's in terms of you have to. There's always return on investment. Okay, so I'm not here to discuss financials, but what I can tell you is that there's a huge amount of investment being put in place, and even these so-called profits are also going to be plowed back into delivering more and putting more infrastructure into the country. So it's a continuous exercise. Sadly, we believe that with all the investments going on, this thing should be a thing of the past pretty soon.
As we need to wind down, let's speak for you for a moment. So it's an opportunity for you to speak for yourself, this question. And you raised it in passing, but I want you to be quite specific, because you raised the concern around you have even FX liabilities from things, maybe loans you've secured, investments you've made, all of the capex issues that you've raised. You want to have return on your investment. You put all of this heavy investment because these things are in dollars. You buy equipment, it's vandalized, something that's supposed to last for 50, 20, certain number of years is lasting for maybe a year or 5 years, and then you have to go back again. The truth is that I don't know how much citizens can help. There is a level citizens can help. So what demand are you placing on the table for government beyond policy tweaks like making vandalization of telco equipment or repositioning them to be national assets, so that if you destroy it, you're not destroying a company's asset, you're destroying the nation's asset? That is one step in the right direction. But punitively, what do you want to see beyond the appeal to citizens to help in securing this equipment? So, for instance, where I'm going to with this is the pipeline issue in the Niger Delta. Sometimes, rather than the Navy securing it, it was outsourced to people like Tantita and the rest of them to manage. And there's a policy, there's an act to that effect, the PIA, that provides for that kind of security. So is that a kind of conversation you're having so that we can also protect your facility beyond just a legislation?
Well, it's a conversation that is already going on. Right now, communication infrastructure is being protected by the NSCDC, and this conversation is already being had. What we're looking for is more punitive measures against people who are caught vandalizing or damaging communication infrastructure, and also the awareness of Nigerians. We are here talking about the effect of poor service, but we still don't appreciate the fact that this is based on infrastructure that we all need to protect. If we in our neighborhood we see anybody climbing a NEPA pole trying to touch it, we all shout out. But we should have the same feeling for communication infrastructure. So this is one of the things we are clamoring for, that there should be more punitive measures. Just a slap on the wrist for people who vandalize or who are caught damaging or stealing infrastructure is not enough. We need more punitive measures taken so that it can form as a greater deterrent, and then these things can be a thing of the past.
Don't you think, sir, that there may be a better way to incentivize? Because if you look at the law that set up the PI, or the part of the PI that has to do with protection of pipelines, I know the positioning and the structuring of your own asset may be quite different. So, for instance, the pipeline, the law says that if there are 10 communities and the pipeline passes through those 10 communities, they give the contract to, for instance, those 10 communities, 0.8 or 0.10, let me just put it that way, they have to protect. If for any reason, we realize that oil leaves 0.1 and successfully passed 2 and is vandalized at 0.5, 0.5 has a part of the operational cost of the company is that 3% will come to the community for community development. At that 0.5, where that vandalization happened, they will not give them that 3% for that year. In fact, they will use the money instead to fix that pipeline. That is more practical way. I'm explaining this to say, is it a possibility within the telecom sector rather than appeal and just this issue around slap on the wrist?
Well, communication infrastructure is a bit more distributed than a linear pipeline. So to tackle communities might be a challenge. But one thing we can do actually is people that construct roads. There's no reason why anybody should construct a road, willfully damage communication infrastructure, and there is no punitive measure against the contractor, for example, for damaging that infrastructure. The communication company has to go back and fix that infrastructure at its own cost. And this is one of the things we are saying, that no, what should happen is that if somebody is constructing a road and you damage infrastructure, you should bear the cost of that damage to the infrastructure. And that way, people that do road constructions will become more careful when they construct roads and ensure that they don't damage fiber optic cables or other facilities that are being laid across where all these constructions are going on. Another thing is people willfully shutting down sites, whereby you say, I have a community issue, and you just go to a site and you seal it up and shut it down. These are things that also should be criminalized and punitive measures taken. There should be no reason whatsoever that anybody can wake up in the morning and go to a communication site and shut it down. These are measures that we're also advocating for, things that can be done to deter these issues occurring. There should be no reason whatsoever. If you have a problem with a communications site or service, you simply make a report. But to take matters into your own hands and go and shut down a site, go and seal up a site, it's like cutting your nose to spite your face. When there is no service in that area, you now go back to the operator. These are things that I think we are looking at and we are clamoring for, most especially the road construction.
We're totally out of time.
Some of these contractors also have budgets in their construction bills, but
yes.
they don't use
it. We're totally out of time. So let me ask again, Bukola, my colleague, had asked before, when should we be expecting optimal service delivery? Because as it is now, it's abysmal. It's not good. This year, next year?
What I can say is that, not yesterday. What I can say is that there is, like I said, no operator is all hands are being on deck. It's not just to say optimal service. We want to provide quality service all year round, all life round. We need all these challenges to be resolved so that we can continue to ensure. So it's not just a one-stop. It should be a continuous exercise. And all hands are really on deck to ensure that not only are these things not a thing of the past, but we provide quality service ab initio all year round, all life round, through the existence of this industry.
Yeah, you're talking about aspiration. You didn't commit to a timeline. I wanted you to commit to a timeline, but aspiration is good, but I wanted a commitment. Between now and December, between now and the election, between now and November, is that something you can do on national TV?
Well, what I can say is that all hands are on deck between now and, you know, improvements are relative. Okay, what you might term improvement to me, it may not improvement to you. What the regulator has been hammering on is quality of experience. So we want a situation whereby the user experience is quality. There's no drop calls. The experience, you browse seamlessly. There are no interruptions in your communication. These are things that the regulator has clamored on for the industry to as a benchmark. NCC has put in all sorts of punitive measures, and operators are complying fully to ensure that.
My apologies. Yeah, now you're sounding like a politician, because when I talk to politicians, when they don't want to answer straight, they go, I wanted you to commit to a time, but it's okay. Tony Emoipore, President, Association of Telecommunications Companies of Nigeria. I must thank you, sir. Please do us well by giving us the best quality service we would like to have, because we don't have a problem paying. We'll quarrel about the problem, the amount later, but at least let's see quality service first. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Consumers have their rights, I'd like to say that, and we are fully committed to ensuring that we provide quality service.
All right. Thank you. We'll take a break, and when we come back after this break, we'll talk about some legalese. The season of political litigations is here. Let's talk about it for a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's the political season. For those of you who don't follow politics, just to give you heads up, the primaries of political parties the process for the primaries has started. It begins with them buying nomination and what is called expression of interest forms. They fill those forms, they submit those forms, they go for screening, and then certain parameters, permit my words now, looked at to know whether you're really qualified to run for that office. They try to negotiate for a consensus. If they get a consensus, they go to a primary to endorse that consensus. If they don't, they do a proper primary, which is direct primary, to elect somebody that is termed as a nomination from that political party to run for various positions, from president, governor, members of the national and state assemblies. And all of these things I've just said must happen between now and May the 30th, which is just maybe less than 2 weeks from now. But in between all of this, there will be litigations, court cases, even afterwards, about people that feel that they were perhaps cheated in the process. And then we've seen a lot when it comes to interpretation, even court judgment, all the way to the Supreme Court. Lawyers and litigants leave the court, and we see different interpretations. So what is going on with political litigations? That's the conversation. Ekemini is a lawyer, legal practitioner, joining us virtually. Mr. Ekemini, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you, Jess, for having me.
I'm going to lay one, but let me ask the questions. When it comes to the interpretation of court judgments in Nigeria, is it a question of mischief, or we need to do something about legal education? I mean, even amongst lawyers. But I put that question at the back of your mind. Let me also bring in another part of the conversation. Recently, we saw what happened with the PDP. One of the two cases that ended up at the Supreme Court for the PDP was a suit filed by Sule Lamido, former governor of Jigawa State. And what was his grounds? He said, I do not want to endorse any candidates, consensus candidate, to be the national chairman of our party, the PDP. Those were his position. I want to contest to be chairman of the party, just like every other person. Well, for whatever reason, the PDP didn't allow him maybe get the form. He went to court, and he got victory at court, and he got all the way to the Supreme Court, because at the trial court said, INEC, don't even go and supervise this exercise, because the man has a right to be elected. Is within his right. So if they don't allow him to buy nomination from them, it shouldn't be. And that, buried that, part of what buried the Ibadan Convention. Just yesterday I read, there's a gentleman, I think his name is Fubara Dagogo. He also wanted to vie for a position in the party, I think APC National Vice Chairman South. I don't know whether he was allowed to buy form or whatever happened, but he went to court to seek redress. Guess what? The other case, I think, was, I stand to be corrected, by Justice Peter Lifo, the one of PDP. And this case of APC was by Justice Joyce Abdul-Malik. And the judge said, hello, issues around Congress is internal affairs of party. Look at section 83. It says there, in fact, awarded costs against the litigants and the lawyer, because the law says 10 million naira should be awarded for even coming to the court to waste the court's time. Similar situation, two different political parties, two different outcomes. Is there something I'm missing here?
So that's the problem with our legal system right now, sadly, where similar facts are interpreted differently with due respect by different courts of the country. In fact, the same court sometimes, because we're talking about the Federal High Court here, so the Federal High Court is the same in every division across the country. A lot of persons will be surprised. I was also surprised yesterday when we got that news in our law platform, which is a national platform, the Nigerian Lawyer. We saw that news breaking there, and a lot of our colleagues were asking that same question about what looks like inconsistency on the part of the courts. The same Federal High Court had ruled that members of the political parties, they have the rights, especially in this case, the PDP and the ADC. You saw that the court had ruled that they had the rights. Like, look at the case of Sule Lamido. He wanted to purchase a farm, and he said he wasn't allowed to purchase a farm. The matter went up to the Supreme Court. Of the three cases that were decided by the Supreme Court against PDP, Sule Lamido's own was one of the cases. So it looks like different strokes for different folks, which is not what should be the case when it comes to law. Law should have universal application, and therefore, when the facts are similar, then the principle of law that should be applied to Mr. A should also be applied to Mr. B. So you see these inconsistencies on the part of our courts, with the greatest respect to the courts, and I think that it is something that will worry the legal system. One of the characteristics of law, which we learned in the university, in fact, it was in our elementary classes, I think year 1 or 2, legal system, legal method. One of the characteristics of law is consistency. That's why you hear stare decisis, that is stand by the decision. The principles are the same, the facts are the same, then you apply so as to engender consistency in the entire Federation of Nigeria. So for me, it's worrisome for us to have conflicting judgments from our courts on similar facts, which should engender the application of the same principles of law that is already laid out there in the law books.
And so should we, view the decision of the Federal High Court to adjourn the ADC matter sine die indefinitely? Should we view it with, in a sense, as an honest decision of the court against the backdrop of the timeline that is provided for all political parties to submit their register, submit their list of candidates, before May the 30th. And this is, also flowing from the cases that had got the ADC to this place in the first place. Because if we're expressing concern about the inconsistencies in court rulings, the substantive case that got the ADC to where it was today was the case to which the leadership of David Mark didn't respond to, because the court had said, come and show cause as to why I shouldn't even attend to the case of the Nephew Bala group in the first place, because the matter was supposed to be, a political, an internal affairs of a political party. So this ruling adjourning the case independently, is it also a matter that we should view with, in a sense, as an honest decision of a competent court of jurisdiction?
You remember that the judge did not, on his own, adjourn the matter sine die. It came from the application of Bala Gombe's lawyer. Okay, that was the reason why the judge now had to adjourn the matter sine die. But with due respect to my Lord Honorable Justice Wite that sat over that matter, if I sat in that court as the judge, I would not have adjourned that matter sine die. Why? It is not of counsel to decide for me what I do in my courts. I'm guided by the law. I'm guided by the principles. So if everybody has his case adjourned sine die just because he has brought an application, then most persons will go to court and keep mischief in the court. Just file, ask for sine die, and then the matter will just stay there in court. And then you would have achieved your aim. Assuming the ADC is unable to present candidates for the next election, I'm saying just assuming, I'm not saying that's the case, then the person, Bala Gombe, would have achieved something mischievous by asking for the matter to be adjourned sine die. Now, an application can be made to the judge. It is left for the judge to grant. And I'm saying, with due respect, if I sat as the judge of that court, I would have continued with that matter. One of the reasons I would have continued with the matter would have been the fact that in the judgment of the Supreme Court, which is higher than me as a High Court judge, the judgment of the Supreme Court talked about hearing those matters, giving accelerated hearing to that very matter. And I would have been bound by that pronouncement of the Supreme Court. And for that reason, I would have told lawyers in the matter, gentlemen, there is an order of the Supreme Court that this matter should be heard expeditiously, and I'm going to hear it expeditiously. If you have written your application to my Lord the Chief Judge, my Lord the Chief Judge has not yet given me any letter to recuse myself or to adjourn this matter sine die. And for that reason, I would have continued with the matter. In view of the fact that the timetable is too close, anybody that is purchasing form now with the ADC is praying so hard. He might be doing dry fasting just to be sure that his form is not a wasted effort. And I think that ought to have been cleared, if if the matter had been allowed to go on as the Supreme Court directed. The order of the Supreme Court directing the matter to be heard expeditiously is higher and far superior to the application of any counsel.
Let's talk about that particular case for a moment before we go to other issues. In fact, the PDP case is a bit more complicated and straightforward at the same time. But let's stay with the issue of the ADC, for instance, and talk to us about what is obtainable in legal practice and court processes. It is Nephew Bala Gombe that approached the court to seek declarative ancillary reliefs and injunctive reliefs, some granted. We have not even got into the, substantive issue, the merit of the case. The same person now, the case has gone all the way to the Supreme Court after almost 7 months. He said he's no longer confident in the judge. Let me not use this word. He doesn't want to continue in that particular court. What is the standard? What is the premise for that particular request to be granted?
You see, anybody can say he doesn't want the judge to hear his matter anymore. He may have his reason. His reason may be genuine. His reason may also be mischievous. The reason may be to delay a matter and ensure that an event passes by, so that the other person will not be able to do what he wanted to do. So when this application is made a number of times. We see it in practice every time, but it is left for the judge to say yes or no. And the judge is the master of his courts anywhere in the world. And when you say an application has been made to the head of the judiciary, the chief judge in this case of the Federal High Court, the head of the judiciary has not yet written to the judge hearing the matter to hands off with the matter and hand it over to another lawyer. And for that reason, the judge can rightly proceed with that matter and no injustice whatsoever will be occasioned. Because it is not of litigants to decide which courts their matters should go to or which judge should hear their matters to the end. And that is why some judges discourage this practice. And I tell you, gentlemen, I am continuing with this matter until my Lord, the Chief Judge of this court, sends a letter to me. I'm a person under authority. Until a letter is sent to me, I'm not going to recuse myself. Now, let me bring you to a matter in the recent past. You remember the case involving Olisametu and Honorable Justice Abangabang when he was, Okonabang, when he was at the Federal High Court before he went to the Court of Appeal. You remember what went on in that court? And my Lord Justice Abangabang said, I mean, Okonopan said, gentlemen, this matter proceeds. I'm not recusing myself until I'm asked to recuse myself. I think that's the same approach that should be applied, especially in matters like this where you see that there can be mischief somewhere. Like I say, if the ADC is unable to present candidates for the next election, Nafi Balagombe's matter, which has now been adjourned Senator, would have been a major contributor to that. And that's the mischief that I think that my lords, the judges of the various courts, should look behind and then say, no, I'm continuing with this matter. Prove your case. If you prove the case, then I grant your release. If you don't prove the case, then I dismiss your matter. Now, in the Court of Appeal, for instance, somebody has gone on appeal, and then he refuses to follow up with the appeal. That means he's not legitimately, he's not genuinely, aggrieved with the judgment that he's taken to the court. And therefore, I think that the judges should master their courts even more. They've been doing that, but they should even do that more when applications like this just come. I don't think judges should recuse themselves. They should go on with the matter. They shouldn't even adjourn Senator, because Senator can mean 1 year from now or 6 months from now, and that's not very good for political matters like this.
All right, let's milk this opportunity that we have with you, especially with scrutiny of the Electoral Act as amended 2026. And former INEC National Commissioner, Mr. Mike Igene, has been drawing attention to some sections in the Electoral Act, which, according to him, could set the stage for electoral malpractice in the coming elections. And he has cited Section 63, Section 137, and I believe Section 138. Perhaps we should take them one after the other. For Section 63, he's talking about, the introduction of ballot papers that could be counted by an electoral officer, which is brought by, a politician. Help us explain, help us understand what the dangers could be, because some are saying this is not a new introduction into the Electoral Act. After all, it's always been there, and we're just making mountain out of the whole molehill. Is that the case?
Well, that's the provision in the Electoral Act just signed by the president. I would have expected that such a provision would not find its way into a modern piece of legislation, not the Electoral Act. I would have expected that should be expunged. I call for amendment of that very provision in the next round of amendment of the Electoral Act, whenever that will be. But let me also speak in practical terms. I have done election petition matters up to the appellate court for well above 12 years now. And I can say that that provision does not even have practical application. The electoral officer comes to the polling units with ballot papers duly serialized, and he declares what he has to the agents of the political parties that are present in the presence of everybody. And everybody has his or her eyes on what has been declared. So where is someone going to bring in the extra ballot papers from wherever to add to what the people have already seen? So I find it difficult to see the practical applicability of that very provision. But again, I say that so as to avoid mischief, so as to avoid someone taking a matter maybe to the court, and the court, depending on what is argued, decides to go by that section. I feel that that section should be expunged in its entirety in the next round of amendment of the Electoral Act. Someone can also go to the Federal High Court and ask the Federal High Court to strike out that section because of the possibility of mischief being acted upon that section.
All right, Ekeminiudim, thank you, sir, for coming on the program. Ekeminiudim is a lawyer, legal practitioner. Thank you. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.